Hi there again. So welcome back to lesson 4 of module 2, that is installation in Oracle AppsDBA R12.2 training. My name is Atul Kumar, and in this lesson we are going to look at Oracle eBusiness Suite R12.2 installation in action. But before that, let me do a quick recap on what we have covered so far in this module. So we started the module where I explained that what all topics we are going to, or lessons we are going to cover in this module. Then we looked at the overview of high level installation of Oracle eBusiness Suite R12.2. Then we looked at key points related to the installation. After key points, we looked at various options on installing Oracle EBS, that is standard versus express type, single versus multi-user, and then single node versus multi-node installation. We also looked at database type, that is fresh database versus vision database. Then we looked at what all operating system on which Oracle EBS is supported. Then I went into detail of various installation options. After that, we looked at what exactly is StartCD and what you get when you use StartCD 51. After that, we looked at the install tool, that is RapidWiz, and the file system layout when you install Oracle EBS, specifically application tier. Then I went into high-level installation steps of Oracle eBusiness Suite 12.2 and then upgraded to 12.2.5, 4 or 6. Then I covered what all Linux versions and in specific Linux 6. Then we also looked at the memory and disk space and CPU requirement and various phases in installation. After that, in the previous lesson, I explained about the staging area and how do you create the staging area. We logged into the server and created or started the staging area creation. Now let's look at installation in action. So first of all, on Unix or Linux, you will start the installation from a root user. Even though the Oracle eBusiness Suite software, that is database tier and application tier, will be owned by a non-root user, the installer will be started or must be started using root user. And on Windows, the user that starts installer should have administrator rights. Now, in order to start the installation, you will go to staging area. Then you go and select appropriate StartCD, then go to disk 1 and then go to folder RapidWiz, and in that you will have an executable called RapidWiz again, and you run that to start the installer. Now first thing installer is going to ask is port pool. So let me explain you what exactly port pool is. So Oracle eBusiness Suite, when installed, it creates lot of services. For example, database listener service, OHS administration port, OHS listener port, node manager port, WebLogic admin server port, and all the managed server ports and lot more. So all these services have some default port on which they listen. So what you do is you select a port pool which could range from 0 to 99, and if you select 0, you will get the default port numbers. If you select 1, then the port pool or port numbers will be incremented by 1 from their default value. Appropriately, if you select port pool 10, which means if default port number for Oracle database is 1521, your services will be started on 1521 plus 10, 1531. Similarly, the default HTTP listener port is, let's suppose, 8000, and if you select port pool 15, you will get 8015. Now in 12.2, you need two port pool. One is for patch addition and second is for runtime addition. So let's suppose why you need second pool or second scenario. So let's suppose you are installing a patch. So your production users will be connecting to the runtime environment, and production or test users or patch users, you will patch an environment and you want to test before you release environment, you want to test the patch side. So you'll be using that patch addition port number to connect and see whether patch has completed successfully and you get all the functionality or not. So you specify port pool, and that where it's a set of default base value for each type of port or services. The value ranges from 0 to 99, and in 12.2, as I said, it's a dual file system, so you need dual port pool. Now important is database port, web listener port, and the node manager port or admin server port as well. So this is a default. You can go and edit the port number as well. So you select the port pool and click on edit port, and you can modify the port numbers. Then after defining the port pool, you go to the database node configuration. And in database node configuration, you first select what type of database you would like for this EBS to, whether it's a vision demo database or a fresh database. We earlier discussed in previous lesson what a vision demo and what a fresh database is. So if you're doing an installation for production environment, or you don't want any dummy data, you will select fresh. If you want your functional users to play kind of environment or a dummy company and all the default setup, you will use vision demo database. However, the vision demo database will use more space. Then you specify the SID or system identifier for your database, and the character it should be 8 or less characters, and this is the SID. Now you will see subsequent installation everywhere it will be SID underscore host name. The context, it will create a context name, and that context name or context value will be SID underscore host name. We'll see that during installation or after installation. Then you have database host name, and it will automatically be picked up from your etc host file. So host file will have IP address and the name, fully qualified domain name. So it will be like imdemo11.k21technologies.com in my case, and hence it has picked database host name as imdemo11 and DNS domain name is k21technologies.com. So it automatically installer will pick up, or RapidWiz tool will pick up from the operating system host file. Then system will automatically also identify what is your operating system and will select database operating system. Then next are database operating system user and groups. That's where the group that you have defined earlier and a user that you have defined or you want Oracle database tier to own, you will specify here. So in my case, we are selecting group as DBA and operating system user that will own the database tier as Oracle. So you'll select Oracle and DBA. Then you have database base directory. So your Oracle base is going to be this location, Wiz Oracle or U01 Oracle, and your SID name. Then it will create a Oracle database home, and then whatever base, and then the version of the database. So in our case, if we are going to pick StartCD 51, you will see 12.1 here. Then the data file directory. So this is the directory in which you will have data directories or DBFs, the data files. Then you specify what is your storage type, whether it's a file system or ASM or any other option. Now with 12.2, you also get an option to select rack during install. Now in previous version, it was not possible to install or select rack during installation, whereas in 12.2 you have that option. So earlier, if you need an Oracle EBS with rack, you first install Oracle's database single node and then convert into rack. Whereas with 12.2, you can install at the install time itself, you select rack database. And then if you're selecting rack, whether do you want a shared Oracle home or you are using separate Oracle home, and what the prefix you want for instance name. So it will be Wiz underscore whatever prefix you do for rack node. So this is database tier configuration. Just to recap, database type, database host name and domain name, database operating system user and group, the Oracle base and home directory, data files, and rack. So this is database tier you specify. And then you hit next, it will go to the licensing model where you say what kind of license you want, and this option will be available only when you select production mode. If you select vision, you don't have, because you want a fresh vision database, it will select all the components. Only when you select production type, you will get a license type option, whether you want a suite license or a component license, whether you want entire suite or component, specific component for Oracle E-Business Suite. Then you have the application tier configuration. So similar to earlier, we saw the database tier. Now this is application tier. So you specify the primary host and domain, and in this you say the host name where application tier is sitting. Now if you're doing multi-node, you will be selecting a different host name here. If your application tier is on a different host than Oracle database tier, you will specify that host name. In our case it's same, so you'll specify the primary host name and then DNS name. Then like the operating system for database, you specify the operating system. Now you select apps OS user. This is your application tier operating system user and application tier operating system group. If you notice here, we are using APPL MGR, whereas other here you use DBA. So if you notice, if you want a single user, you will use same user that you've used for database, that is Oracle. In our case, the database tier was Oracle, and app tier configuration we are saying APPL MGR. So this is a multi-user. So you select apps user on operating system user and group. Now ensure that these users and groups are already created there. If they are not created, the checks will fail and you have to rerun or create these users and groups, operating system groups. And at a later screen, you also need to know the password because you're going to supply that password later in the slides. So ensure that you have apps username and password, or this operating system username and password. Then you have application tier base directory and application instance directory. Again, in our another module where we look at file system, we are going to cover what exactly is an instance directory. This is instance directory is different from Oracle instance, which I covered in Oracle Fusion Middleware Concepts. So this is eBusiness Suite instance directory. So you specify where you want to create or what is the base. Then you have file system 1 and file system 2. This is my run edition and patch edition. Now the run edition and patch edition will always flip between these two file systems. Then my file system 1 instance and file system 2 instance. Again, both file system 1 will have an instance directory. File system 2 will have its own instance directory. Then you have a file system for non-edition file system, which you specify. Now there is something called as APPL CSF, which is for concurrent manager or concurrent processing output and log file. We'll cover that separately. Now, if you want Apple APPL logs or application or concurrent manager log file to be distributed or on a single node, and then you can specify the services, or you can edit what all services you want to run on this node. If you don't change anything, all the services will run on that node, and this is application tier services. If you can click edit and you can modify if you want to change or run some services on this host, other services on other host. Again, multi-node installation that we covered earlier. So you will select which kind of a service. So again, to recap, you specify primary host name and domain name, application tier operating system user and groups, application base and instance directory, the file system for edition 1 and edition 2, again to support online patching. We'll cover patching in a separate module where I'll explain or go deep dive. Similarly, what these editions file systems are and what are the important files, we'll cover that in a separate module. Then you have non-edition files. Then you can specify the services on this application tier. Now, when you click on edit service, this is how it's going to look like. So you have root service, you have web administration, you have web entry point service, web application service, batch processing, and other services. What these services are, we'll cover that. Now, because it's a primary node, that's why these primary services like root service, web administration, and web entry are enabled. You can't disable them on the primary node. They have to be enabled on primary node. Then you can select or remove or add or remove these services, that is web application service, batch processing service, and other services. You can decide to configure them or disable them from this host and run it on other node. However, you can't disable root services, web administration services, and web entry point. So these are various services, and you select this when you're doing multi-node installation. Now this is the services. So whatever services you see here, this is explanation of that. So root service is your node manager. Node manager will cover that. When we look at the Fusion middleware concept, we'll see what is the role of node manager. And this service is managed by a service script AD node manager, and we'll cover that in start stop module, where we'll go and look at each of these scripts. Then web administration is your WebLogic admin server. Again, this is a root service on from administration node. You can't remove that. Then you have a web entry point, which is your Oracle HTTP server and OPM and Oracle Process Manager. We saw that earlier. Then your web application services, where these are your 4 managed servers, which we saw in the console in module 1. Then you have batch processing service, which is your concurrent manager, fulfillment, TNS listener. Again, we'll go into that detail in Oracle concurrent manager or concurrent processing module. And then other services like form server and MWA, which is for mobile or mobile applications. We'll look into that as well. Then on the next screen, you specify the passwords. And now with this release 12.2, another feature is you can change the default passwords at the time of configuration. It was not possible in previous version, but you can change here. So you specify the password for WebLogic user, you specify the apps tier, or you need to enter application tier, operating system user and password, confirm, and you can also select database user password. So you get an option to change apps password, system password, product schema passwords. You can change all these. And then finally, you can install, or if you want to do a multi-node, you can add more servers. So if you want to do a primary, add one more application tier node, that's where you will select and say add a node, and you specify as many nodes as you want. So you will by default have database node and primary app server, which has primary or administration services. Then you can add more services for multi-node installation. And then finally, it's going to do a system check, which is it's going to see that all prerequisites are completed successfully, whether all the ports are available or not. Database prerequisite like operating system RPMs or kernel settings are right or not. Port which we have defined are unique or not. There's enough file space or disk space available. The stage area is proper. The web server or OHS prerequisites are installed. Middle tier can talk to the database tier. Operating system and groups are users are there. The file system is intact or not. Then you have host and domain. You can ping the servers or not. And the system utilities are there or not. So in this, I've shown an example. Cross means there is a problem with the file system. So you click on this button here and it will open a pop-up window. It will tell you why exactly or what is the reason behind that failure. So once you know the reason, you fix that problem and click on retry and do it till all the buttons you see are green. So you will click on X to identify the issue and fix it. Once issue is fixed, you click on retry. So for example, in my file system, I clicked on, I saw that inventory pointer is missing. So there is, please check orange.loc. The content should look like this. So that it looks like there's a problem in my Aura inventory file. What that Aura inventory is, we'll cover that separately. So you fix the problem and then hit retry. And then finally do the installation prerequisite check. So there is a step 1 to 8, and we are going to cover that in detail in our activity guide. So there'll be a dedicated lab activity guide, which you'll be doing. So step 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now in our case, there is a slight problem in terms of TCP with a TCP valid node checking. You might encounter this problem, and that's why again covered in our lab activity guide. So I'll explain in the next video when we actually do it on server. So I'm going to do a demo now after this in the next lesson where we actually log into server and start installing. And that's where I'm going to explain what this issue is. So you will have step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. What these various installation steps are, again, I'm going to explain them in the next lesson. What happens when something fails, I'm going to cover that in as well. Then finally, you should have, once the process installation is complete, and depending on the server spec, it might take anywhere from couple of hours to maybe 8 to 10 hours. In our case, on the machines on our cloud, you might be roughly under around anywhere ranging from 6 to 8 hours or 10 hours. So once installation is complete, you should have all the checks are validated and ensure that everything is working. If again something like prerequisite check, if something fails, you click on that and see why it failed, click or fix that and hit retry. And then once this is done, you can finally check that. Now, this completes this lesson. I know it's a little bit lengthy lesson, but it's very, very useful. Now, in the next lesson, I'm going to cover the log file location, what these logs contain, and how do you troubleshoot. And I'm going to give some common problems, or there's a long list in our activity guide of problems. So you can look at what are common issues that you might encounter and what are these various log files are telling you. On this particular lesson, now in the next lesson, we'll look at, or I'll be actually explaining about these all log file location, and I'll also cover, or we'll do a step-by-step instruction using our lab guides or activity guide. So in your membership portal, you should have already a lab activity guide like this. And this is for installation module, where this covers base install 12.2.0 installation with, as I said earlier, we have two start or multiple start CDs. So we have given you a demo of both 51 in this lab activity, StartCD 51 and StartCD 48. If you do use StartCD 51, you'll be installing database 12c with EBS 12.2.0. If you install using StartCD 48, you will be getting 11.203. Now, that is okay with 12.2.0, but when you upgrade to 12.2.4 or 12.2.5 or 6, you need to first upgrade the database. And that's why within this guide, you also have the, if you're using StartCD 48, then database upgrade steps. So this is an index look like. So first is going to be documentation link. So all the relevant documents related to whether it's from my Oracle support, link of those or good metaling notes which are documented here. Then environment details on how we have set it up, what all port numbers or the operating system user groups we have defined. Then the AppsDBA software checklist, which means when you download the software, what all things you need to download. Then actual downloading the software from Oracle eDelivery, then prerequisite, and checking the StartCD and building or creating a build stage. Then you create the database and operating system application to your operating system user. You set the inventory, and the real fun begins from, if you want to use 48 CD, you come to this section. If you want to use 51, you go to the respective sections. I would recommend you to go 51 if that works. So we'll tell you before the class which one you should pick. So you'll be using 51 or 48. If you're using 48, then there'll be a lot more work in terms of upgrading the database from 11.203 to 11.204. Whereas if you're doing 12.2.0, there's no need to install. And then after that, we'll look at how to start stop services and how to access application. And then also a troubleshooting section where you can see what all issues which you encountered. So these are various issues which we or various trainees in past have encountered. So this is very comprehensive guide, and like that for each module there will be an activity guide, so you actually work and do hands-on. The real learning is when you do the lab exercises. So head on to the next lesson where we'll look at the actual installing Oracle EBS on server. So we'll connect to the VNC screen and we'll do a step-by-step installation instructions and we'll install it. And I'll show you in the background what's happening behind the scene. So I'll see you in next lesson.